Hello everyone, and welcome to your small group meeting. And in the series that we're part of, looking at family flaws, we're looking at Christ-centered marriages. I'm aware that some of you might be watching this and you may not be married. You may hope to be married soon, or you may have been married before, and you may think there's no relevance to you in terms of this topic. But I want to suggest that I think you can learn a lot from it, especially if you are preparing to get married. But also, this is more speaking about how Jesus relates to his church, his bride. And so I'm sure all of us will gain from this today as we look at Christ-centered marriages. So Carms and I, as I make this video today, have been married for 12 years. Recently celebrated our anniversary. And we have gone through a lot together. We've done a lot together. We have had times of having plenty, especially when the kids weren't around, and times of not having much. We have had times where our marriage felt like it was in a good space, and times when our marriage seemed to be struggling along. In fact, there have been times when I have felt or thought that our marriage is in a really good space. And then when I catch up with Carms, I realize actually we're not in the greatest space. I've kind of run ahead and left my wife behind, and we need to sort things out. See, we don't have the perfect marriage, and I don't think that's what God expects of us. We are a work in progress. And when we have struggled, we have tried to find solutions. That's the natural way of dealing with things. You try and find solutions to the problem, to sort out the problem. And so what do? We put date nights in place. Now, we've got to have more regular date nights, or we've got to leave our phones aside when we have these conversations between husband and wife, and try and listen to one another. Or we try and take an interest in one another's hobbies. And maybe you've done some similar stuff. You've tried to put things in place. Maybe you've even gone to the extent of going for counseling as a couple, saying we need help to sort out our issues. And I want to say today that all of these things are good things. But unless Christ is central to your marriage, you will not have the marriage that God has in mind for you. And that's so important to understand, a Christ-centered marriage. And so we look at Matthew 19 and hear what Jesus says about marriage. We read from verse 4, and it says, "Have you not read that He who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, what God has put together, let man not separate." So I've got three thoughts, and you can follow in your booklet along with me. The first is that marriage is intended to illustrate the gospel. And we see that in Ephesians 5, verse 32, as Paul writes, he says, this mystery is profound. Marriage is a mystery. But I'm talking about Christ and the church. It's a picture of Christ and the church, a picture of the gospel message. And so the main picture that marriage portrays, or should portray, is of how Jesus wants a relationship with his people. So when Christ becomes the goal, the mission, the centerpiece, the most important person in the relationship in your marriage, what starts happening is we start displaying the gospel message to the world. When we as husbands start laying down our lives for our wives, putting them first, being selfless in how we relate to them, we start displaying who Christ is to his church. When wives start loving their husbands in a way where the husband feels like, I can lead in this family, when wives put their husbands in that positions of loving them in that way, then we start displaying the picture of how the church relates to Christ. And we say all of this stuff, but it's hard. And you may think right now, it's hard. Marriage is hard, especially if you're struggling right now. And that leads us to our second thought, that marriage is intended to refine one another. And that's what sometimes makes it challenging. And we read that, and you can read for yourselves from Ephesians 5, verse 25 to 28. Paul speaks about that. Husbands, love your wives, and that marriage is this mystery. I've realized that as I thought about my marriage with Calms for the last 12 years, that Calms has shaped a lot of my character. I think about some of the weaknesses that I used to have, and she's kind of shaped me and helped me in those areas. She's strengthened me as a person. She has shaped me a lot, and I'm better off for it. But it's not easy. In the same way, Jesus prepares his bride. He shapes her. He molds her. He refines her and challenges her at times. And it's not always an easy process. And marriage has a way of allowing our weaknesses to surface and to show us, I lack in this area. But what I want to share with you today, and hopefully this helps you, is that often our natural tendency is to try and fix our spouse. We even go to the extent of praying for them. Father, won't you sort this thing out? Won't you change my wife? Won't you change my husband? And we're constantly challenging and saying, you must change in this area. And that's not the way God intended it to happen. We must remember that God's involved in our marriage as well. And that we can't change people, He changes people. And so the focus when it comes to refining ourselves and changing us in our marriage is for us to put the focus on ourselves. So don't make it your aim to change your spouse. Let God do that, and rather you focus on adjusting yourself before God. And as you do that, you will be a blessing to your spouse. And the final thought is a simple one. And we read from Genesis 2, verses 18 to 24. And we see God speaking about man should not be alone. There should be someone by his side and her side. That marriage is God's idea. This is probably the point that brings me the greatest comfort as I look at my marriage. The fact that I know, I don't have to guess this, I know that God is involved in my marriage. You see, He invented it, and so He believes in it. He fights for every marriage. And you might be sitting next to your spouse right now as you listen to this, and you can believe this and know this, that God, He believes in your marriage, regardless of how broken it may seem right now to you. He believes in it, and He was willing to fight for it. And so some of us may have forgotten the fact that God is the one who brought you together, and God is the one who established your marriage, and He's also committed now to walking with you. And maybe you've sort of closed the door on God and not allowed Him into your marriage. And my encouragement today is open that door again. Pray with your husband, pray with your wife. Stand together and allow God to intervene, because marriage is His idea and He believes in it. I hope this helps you guys. God bless.